This is the Joan Prime Commander review. The time is finally here. Those of you who've watched my channel for a while know that Joan Prime is one of my favorite commanders in the game, and she will probably continue to be for some time. With her unique kit and her pseudo support damage hybrid, makes it rewarding to be a support. So in this video we're going to go over her skills, the most common talent she uses, gear and armament recommendations, pairings, and any reports and any other information that would be pertinent to her as a commander. Without further ado, let's get started. So first, let's go over her skills. Her primary skill is a fan AoE, think pre-expertise YSG or YSS. 3 targets and a damage factor of 2,000, which is a huge damage factor. On top of that, you get 2 allies and yourself dealing 5% more damage for 3 seconds and 20 rage per second. So that gives you 60 rage and 2 allies 60 rage, as well as 5% increased damage for your ally as well, and for your secondary commander, because it'll be right in time for your secondary commander to cast a skill. And it gets even better when we get to her 4th skill, which we'll get to in just a second. Second, we have a 20% attack, 10% march speed, and an increased 10% march speed and 5% normal attack damage. This is not necessarily a crucial skill if you don't want to fully expertise her, but I really like it because it gives her a lot of march speed. 20% march speed is actually really significant, and it makes her really viable off territory to do a lot of hit and run and a lot of high mobility stuff for like ruins and altars, for example, where you want to be able to move quickly. Her 3rd skill gives 5% more damage when attacking troops, and when using skills you can get an additional 30% normal attack damage once every 5 seconds. This is not super crazy either, and it's not a super push skill if you're not expertising her, but I like it as well just because the extra 5% damage is significant, and plus it allows you to get her expertise. Her 4th skill basically gives her at max a full chance to recast her skill in 10% health. So what this means is you get a damage factor 2,000 skill, the ally, your secondary commander casts a skill, then you get another damage factor 2,000 skill. This is only once every 10 seconds, but that comes out to, if you're just sitting there 1 versus 1 not moving around, every 3rd skill, and if you are moving around a lot, it sometimes even comes down to every 2nd skill because you're not constantly gaining rage and you're constantly hopping in and out of combat during like a field fight around an altar. Lastly, her expertise gives her 5% more counterattack damage, which helps her against Swarm. And whenever the target has more than 30% units remaining, they deal 5% more damage. So between that and her other 2 skills that aren't necessarily necessities, if you do go to push her abilities, she gets 5% normal attack damage, 5% more damage, and another 5% more damage, plus 5% more counterattack. So she gets a lot of bonus damage in her skills, on top of the fact that she has one of the highest skill damage factors in the game as a field commander, and she gets a recast on it. So it really makes her a super solid damage dealer and really can stand up there with all of the big hitters in the current field meta, while also giving allies rage and allies damage. Next, we're on to the talents. These are the talents I use for Joan Prime most of all. Noteworthy is that I do 5 out of 5 on Cage of Thorns. You don't technically have to do 5 out of 5, you can do 1 out of 5, but the march speed reduction is useful, and those other 4 ranks would maybe go into 3% attack and 1% health, which is not game breaking versus having that 25% march speed reduction. And since you could hit up to 5 enemies, that means you can slow down all 3 of the enemies you hit with your AoE, while also giving yourself a decent amount of move speed, a decent amount of skill damage taken reduction, and a decent amount of damage reduction in general. Another really underrated talent that is here on this that I don't think people talk about enough is Hasty Departure. That's a 60% move speed boost for 10 seconds after you leave a structure. This does include farm nodes, flags, anything that you go into and you're no longer in the field, it counts. So even if you jump into a farm node, you can then get 60% move speed. So when you pair that with a 25% reduction in enemy move speed when you hit them, if you are farm hunting, for example, or you are doing anything where you want to stick to your enemy and you have the advantage, they're not going to be able to easily get away from you. So this is great for even counter farm hunting when you have an enemy that is trying to farm hunt, and you can get on. If you can hit them with one skill, they're pretty much not going to get away from you. And it is actually really useful, especially since she has a recast. You get a 25% march speed reduction for 3 seconds, your secondary commander cast, and then you recast and you slow them down again. So then you slow them down for 6 seconds, and then 4 seconds later you're able to do that again. So it just shows you how well that talent actually works with Joan Prime. And I think it's an under-talked about aspect of her as a commander, because you don't see that in 1v1 reports. And that is really, that and Hasty Departure are both not really shown in 1v1 reports. And it really just undersells her a little bit. But overall, I find these talents to be super useful. And honestly, you get really great value for the amount of investment you put into it. Next, we're on to equipment and formations. For equipment, I recommend just the pretty standard cavalry equipment sets. The more survivability you can get, the better, because that buff, the AoE buff you're giving to your allies and yourself is useful, and keeping yourself alive is going to be great for that. Also, due to the high damage factor that you have on her primary skill and the recast, she tends to get a lot of attention in the field just due to the sheer damage she puts out. So I recommend getting as much survivability as possible, health, defense, whatever you can get a hold of to help keep her afloat for longer. For armaments, you actually have 3 options, to be honest with you. For a pure damage build, wedge formation is the way to go. The more damage you can deal, the better. And this is a perfect example of how you can just take that 2000 damage factor and run with it even further. And then you can get even more specialty inscriptions and even the non-specialty inscriptions to increase skill damage dealt as much as you can. Alternatively, if you want to lead into the support role, if you run her with a commander like William or an AoE buffer like Mulan, where you give any kind of defense, attack, health buff to allies, Echelon Formation is great, because you multiply that buff by 1.2 times. It doesn't sound like a lot, but the difference between 25% attack for an ally and 30% attack for an ally is a lot more significant than it might appear. And especially when you are hitting 3 to 5 allies with that buff, that can really turn the tide of fights during sustained fighting. So if you want to run a full support build, Echelon Formation is also an excellent option. And lastly, for anybody who is looking to run hit and run, or during downtime, run farm hunting or counter enemy farm hunters, triple line formation is also a viable option for you. And you just want to stack as much move speed as possible on this, and just try to keep, because your idea is to try to move as fast as you can to prevent the enemy from hitting you. Whereas you're not as focused on the 1v1 trades or the AoE buffs you're giving to allies, because chances are it's going to be you and one other enemy. And that one other enemy is either going to be another farm hunter who has given up their tankiness, so they're not trying to win 1 versus 1 anyway, or they are a farm you are hunting, which is going to be inherently lower tier and less strength than you anyway, so you don't need the increased skill damage like you would for wedge. So triple line formation works great for farm hunting and counter farm hunting operations. So who should you pair with Joan Prime? For rallies, pretty much Nevsky is the main option. His 4 skill, giving an additional 35% skill damage when it's only cavalry, pretty much takes one of the highest skill damage factors in the game on Joan Prime, and then Nevsky's skill damage and pushing it even higher up, putting out an insane amount of single target damage, and also a little bit of AoE that can hit anybody trying to reinforce a structure that you're rallying. So overall, it makes a really great pairing, and it is probably one of the more popular pairings. For the field, you can still use Nevsky as well. And alternatively, if you want to go for a more supportive build, you can go with a commander like William, who gives an AoE defense buff and rage buff to allies. And while the rage buff doesn't get boosted by Echelon, the defense buff does get boosted by Echelon. So that's a nice little bonus as well. Alternatively, with the new museum buffs coming from Minamoto, that is also an option. If you want to go for a more budget-friendly, free-to-play friendly option, that is also an option for you. But overall, the main pairings you're going to see are Nevsky, William, and with the Minamoto buffs, Minamoto. And with that, we conclude our commander review of Joan Prime. Joan Prime is really one of those commanders I think most players are going to find some use out of. And I don't see her going anywhere anytime soon. Whether you want to be a farm hunter or you want to track those farm hunters down. Whether you want to support allies or be the damage dealer that your team needs. Whether you want to support the rally or be the rally. Joan Prime can do all of that. And it's that versatility and that unique kit that allows her to do that I think is going to keep drawing players to her. And I'm sure it's drawn me out of Garrisons even, being a Garrison player and building Joan Prime. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. And as always, good luck, fight well, and I will see you on the battlefield, maybe with the Joan Prime.